薄いのアホ。
プリズムパワーメイクアップオーカードレディー。
Welcome to Shojo and Tell, where we discuss shoujo manga and tell who's hot and who's not, talk about themes, and just generally geek out. Today, December 2nd, 2020, we'll be shoujo and telling about Socrates in Love by Kyoichi Katayama and Kazumi Kazui. I didn't practice those, and it showed. That's fine. I'm your host, Ashley McDonald, and I'm joined by Asher Sofman. Hello, Asher.
Hello, Ashley McDonald.
Once again, Asher and I are physically in the same location, yet we have sequestered ourselves in separate rooms because, you know, the audio quality is better that way. So we have a nice hallway and a bathroom between us.
The space between us.
And the length of Asher's entire room. His room's bigger. Yeah.
It's true.
It's true. I'm a nice landlord. Gave you the big room.
I am also bigger than you.
Whatever. Asher, who are you?
Your boyfriend, I guess.
Yeah, you guess. No, I'm pretty sure that's true. I concur. 95% certain.
It's actually almost been a year and a half. We're like 3 days shy of it, 4 days shy of it.
Go us. We're getting there. We're getting to that point where it's like, are we for real though? We better be.
It's true.
Yeah, so we'll give a life update just because I think it'll be funny if we do this every like 2 months. So I was listening to the All My Darling Daughters episode to edit, which we recorded almost exactly 2 months ago. And we were like, we live in my mom's house still. And in our house, we don't have a kitchen floor. We're still like tearing up the paper. Life update. We now live in our own house. Scandalous. We even have a whole kitchen floor. It's magical.
It's pretty great. I forgot about scraping up the paper. I had blocked it from my mind as a traumatic memory.
Oh, yeah. We did rant about how it smelled disgusting, and that's still true.
It's awful.
It was bad. But now we have like a pretty floor, and that's good. Our newest struggle is that we have to redo all the like pipes in our basement, and the back room that we also have to basically redo in its entirety was leaking. My dad should have fixed that today. So, hopefully progress. 1 step forward, 2 steps back. I don't know. We're getting there.
1 step forward, 2 steps back does not really make progress, but...
Okay, listen. All right. 3 steps forward and then 2 steps back.
Okay.
We're getting there. Yes, so check in with us in February. Maybe we'll have pipes that don't leak and stuff. That'll be good.
That'll definitely be good coming into spring.
Yeah.
Would you say we're waiting for spring?
Oh my god, I'm definitely waiting for spring. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Today we're here to talk about Socrates in Love, which is a 1-volume manga based on a novel. And I think that this would be very hard given our histories with it and the fact that it's short to do any sort of spoiler-free discussion. So we're forgetting that altogether today. Spoiler warning, if you have not read Socrates in Love in either version, I suppose. I haven't read the novel, so I don't know. I can't compare that. You should probably not listen to this podcast. And again, it's only 1 volume, so maybe you should go spend an hour reading Socrates in Love and then come back and listen to this podcast.
There's also movie adaptations.
Yes.
Yeah, you could watch one of those.
Yes, there are many ways to consume the story that is Socrates in Love. So, go pick one. Come back. I guess the hardship of this is that I believe it is currently out of print. It is no longer listed on Viz's website, and they did the translation. But it is fairly easy to find out-of-print copies, unlike some other mangas I've done on this podcast, or will be doing on this podcast. The money I spent on out-of-print manga. But anyway, yeah, so you should be able to find a copy for like $5 and not, $50. And if you're like, maybe I need to see a little bit if I would want to read Socrates in Love, Asher will give a plot synopsis that hopefully won't be too spoilery. And then you turn off this podcast. Anyway, Asher.
Oh, gosh. No, it's
Oh,
impossible because it
goodness.
starts at the end.
Okay, fine.
Oh, I guess no. I guess
Asher can't decide.
I should have prepped this beforehand, but I was busy making banana bread.
Excuses. I showed you this outline a whole day ago.
You did. All right. So Socrates in Love is set in, it's a high school love story. These a boy and a girl,
The heteronormativity is there, yes.
Yes,
Go on.
they've known each other for a while because like they grew up in the same schools. It's like a country town, and they end up being class reps together, and they just sort of talk to each other a lot. They have a very natural bond. Everyone's like, when are they going to get together? And then they do get together. And this is the point where spoilers come. So now you should turn off the podcast for sure. But what happens is that Aki, the girl, gets sick and has to go to the hospital. And the story is kind of like, what is love? What does it bring us to do for one another, to one another? Oh, I guess I didn't name the characters. So there's Aki Hirose, who is our heroine, and our main character, viewpoint guy, is Sakutaro. I don't even know his last name.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. He has a friend named Oki who, was kind of a jerk, but is also kind of like a human being, which is nice.
We'll talk about him.
We will talk about him. And then it gets very dramatic towards the end.
No.
This is the last spoiler warning you're going to get. Aki dies! Hooray! Of leukemia. And there's a bit about like what that does to Sakutaro and how eventually he finds a way to move on.
Yep, that's Socrates in Love is definitely it's designed to make you cry.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a Nicholas Sparks novel, but Japanese. It's a Walk to Remember, but Japanese. We'll also get into that more later.
You're expecting that your listenership has read Nicholas Sparks and not Socrates in Love?
Yeah, because I think my listenership is American.
Okay.
And A Walk to Remember had actually a very high penetration in our culture.
I forgot it had a movie.
It has a movie. Yeah, and if it's mostly people our age who largely identify as queer or female or whatever, like the soft side
Wow.
of things. Yeah, I guess I stand by it.
Okay, no. I was just like, you think your anime listeners or your manga listeners read a book over a manga? That's all. That's my angle. Maybe it's just me coming from a place where like I read Socrates in Love in high school and then didn't read A Walk to Remember until you made me in college.
I made you read A Walk to Remember?
Yeah.
That doesn't shock me.
I think, and then you made me watch the movie. I think.
All right. I mean, come on. The movie has a good soundtrack.
Of course.
I really like the soundtrack.
Of course it does.
Anyway, the point is, Ashley was really into A Walk to Remember. A Walk to Remember was actually very formative for me. So that is all to say that while I had not read Socrates in Love before, it was definitely always on my radar because I was like, oh yeah, A Walk to Remember, but Japanese. Like, I'm totally into it. And then for some reason, I just didn't do that ever until now. I guess before I ask Asher what his familiarity is with the series, I'll go into Socrates in Love has a somewhat interesting like backstory for how it became popular. Like, before our intensely influencer-driven media landscape, I guess. It was recommended by a celebrity actress named Ko Shibasaki. I'm really bad at the names today. So it was like in a pop culture magazine, she happened to recommend it, and the author of this novel like had 2 previous novels that weren't popular, so they were not at all like expecting this one to blow up, and then it totally did based on this recommendation in like the mid to early 2000s. And I guess for me, it's also significant that it was one of the first novels like that I knew was translated from Japanese that I was interested in reading. And I do think that if I had read it as a younger person, I would perhaps be more into light novels than I am now, which is not at all. And I'm actually like, I do not want to be into light novels. And I think I might have had a different attitude. Like with this, even though it's not technically a light novel, I think I would have had, just a slightly different attitude as a child than I do now. Because I think it's very interesting. Asher will give you his own backstory, but I think Asher, like, I was so into A Walk to Remember in the period between when I was like 12 and 22, I would say. Like just really into A Walk to Remember. Again, I mean, spoilers for A Walk to Remember, I guess, but A Walk to Remember is also about a girl who is diagnosed with leukemia, who, I mean, I guess it's different in that the guy she falls in love with is somewhat of a jerk. Like, he falls in love with her and makes him less of a jerk. I think there are some elements of that in Socrates in Love too. But yeah, so I was just really into that. And now I think my love of those type of just really, really melodramatic stories has definitely been tempered. And so I didn't, like cry immensely at Socrates in Love. I definitely got teary at different points. But I think this means that Asher and I actually meet in the middle, based on Asher's previous experience with this.
Yeah. So I initially read this. I must have been 16 or 17, probably. I read it because my girlfriend at the time really liked it. She was more into the like sad romance things. I don't like sad stories, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
I never have, and I still don't. So
but there are just some things that this gets really right?
Yes, exactly. So, initially I really didn't like it. I didn't connect very much to the story at all. Like I barely remembered like anything that happened. Like, I remembered her dying.
Central, yes.
Yeah, but like I didn't remember anything that happened in the first 2/3 of the book of the manga. Reading it this time, I was impressed with how real the characters felt, despite our actually not knowing very much about. We don't come to know very much about any of these characters, but we see their relationships to one another, and how those form and change, and it's very, very powerful. The things it says about, sort of the like weird and uncliche things we do when we're in love just were really cool. So I ended up liking it more this time around than the first time. I'm still, I'm not a fan of melodrama, and I never have been, and I have never
and I never will be.
Probably not. But no, like, this isn't the type of story that I cry over.
Yes. So you also did not cry.
Right.
But I think despite our lack of tears, yes, we actually do have a very deep appreciation of certain story beats where we're like, wow, this is not something that we normally see. I feel.
Yeah. I actually, I think I feel sort of the same way about it that I do about All My Darling Daughters. Is like, this was written by an adult who has an adult understanding of how relationships work.
Yes. Well, I guess. I guess we should do the walkthrough first. Yeah. So we'll try to go through it. Like, I think there are pretty much 3 distinct parts to the story. And we'll try to wrap in the thematic beats as we go, and if we don't, we'll go back to them. But so, big story beat 1 is basically like part 1 of them like falling in love, right? Like, so you didn't even mention Sakutara's grandfather,
because it's better going into that unspoiled.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so Sakutara's grandfather plays a big part in the first part as well. So, you know, the beginning is like Sakutaro and Aki are always around each other, and everybody's like, why aren't you like an item yet? And they're like, do we like each other like that? They just like don't talk really about that stuff. Don't express those feelings. But they totally have them. Yeah, but then the like, I don't know, do you consider the grandfather's story the B plot or the A plot? I'm gonna call it the B plot for now. But the B plot of that this part is that Sakutaro's grandfather is like, hey, I want to go steal the ashes from the grave of this woman that I loved deeply, but could not spend my life with because I was poor and she was rich and her parents would not allow that. And Sakutaro, of course, is like, what, Grandpa, we cannot do this. This is like a crime. And I do not want to be charged with a crime. And he, you know, Sakutaro like doesn't understand why his grandfather would go to such lengths to be with somebody who doesn't even like exist anymore in this life, right? Like, it's like, why are you risking your own life in some way to be with this other person? Of course, he doesn't get it because he has never been in love before. Basically, what I actually liked about this story the most was, you know, one of the ways that the grandfather kind of like tricks Sakutaro into helping him is that they have like fancy meals together. They don't outright come out and say like, "Oh, this is a super fancy meal," right? Like, it's not like that big of a juxtaposition, but Sakutaro is like, "Oh, we had like really nice fish today," and all this stuff. And I thought that was nice to show how far the grandfather had come from his like poor beginnings and how he was like worthy of this deceased lady that you know, bigoted society people wouldn't let him be with and stuff.
Oh man, Ashley, I got to ruin this for you briefly. I think
Why?
the implication was he got involved in some shady stuff to get money to help.
Really?
Yeah, to help her with the tuberculosis, like get
Wait,
treatment.
why?
Why? I think it said that. Do you have the book with you?
I do. Where did it say that?
When he was talking about why the family rejected him, he was like, I got into some reckless business, and they, once she recovered, they didn't want her to marry some guy who, like, this rough guy. So I was like, I think he was
Wait, but then that colors my perception of when he has that discussion with, when Sakutaro comes and is like he's like, why do you need this money, right? Like,
yeah, I think it should.
Man, I should have given you the book. I could do that. I could walk over there and give you the book.
You want me to show you where it happens?
Yeah.
All right, come over.
Okay. It's gonna be fun to edit. Okay. We have found this place of which Asher speaks. And I think when I read that, I interpreted it differently. Actually, like, I see what you're saying.
Why don't you just quote the passage for people?
Okay. Let's see.
It's page 23.
Yeah, I'm on the page. I'm debating where to begin. God. Okay. So Aki says, so your grandfather could not marry this woman that he was in love with. Sakutaro is making a grumpy face and says, seems that way. This lady was from a well-to-do family, but she had tuberculosis. And at the time, Grandpa was super poor. He went around earning money recklessly for her treatment so that he could marry her. But she recovered, and her parents wouldn't allow their daughter to marry a rough guy like Grandpa. I guess I didn't necessarily take that as, like, illegal activities.
I mean, it may not have been, but it just, I think it complicate, like, how do you earn money recklessly?
I don't know. I guess I took that as, like, more earnestly and, like, putting himself, like, at risk. And, like, really, like, overworking himself. I see what you're saying. But because, like, to me, him doing a bunch of, like, really hard stuff still makes him a rough guy, right? Like, it's not like he's some upstanding,
right? Yeah.
well-to-do man. Yeah, like I don't know. I just didn't get any other vibes that his grandpa had been like a very bad boy, and I think that's like
Well, he did rob a grave.
no. But isn't that what? But then like Sakutaro is like, Grandpa, we can't rob a grave, right? Like he's not like, oh, my grandfather who did things illegally in the past. It makes sense for him to
Right.
want to rob a grave, right? Like
Mysterious grandpa.
mysterious grandpa. That's all to say, fine. Asher, who has read this twice, is better at reading.
Fushigi grandpa.
Yes. And they do steal the ashes. They do that. I guess to me, the funny part about the story was that, like, yeah, you know, Sakutaro and him go to the grave, and Sakutaro wants to turn on a flashlight. And his grandpa's like, no, we don't need a flashlight. And Sakutaro's like, but we're going to get so lost. And then, you know, his grandpa just like knows the way because, yeah, he's been here 50 million times. I was like, come on, Sakutaro, get it together. You haven't read enough yet. You have not read enough stories, my friend.
Yeah, Sakutaro's all like, whoa, how does grandpa know where the grave is? Are they pulled to each other supernaturally?
Oh, yeah. It's like, come on, it's way more basic than that.
Yeah, he figured it out. He figured it out eventually, but like it was pretty funny. And then like once he figures it out, it's actually very poignant.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely like his first step into understanding. It's like, oh, people do absolutely crazy things for people that they love who still don't even exist anymore.
Right.
In this plane of existence.
And I don't think they steal all the ashes, just enough to like mix with his grandpa's ashes later.
Oh, yeah. No. I didn't get the impression that they were like, take the whole thing.
God.
They're like, you can have some here too. That's fine. And obviously, Sakutaro is the byproduct of a different woman that his grandfather loved, his grandma.
Yes, his grandpa had a wife eventually.
We're pretty sure he loved her.
He at least respected her and honored her.
Yeah. He was a good boy, as far as we know. Gosh, they're trying to make this complicated.
Come on. Aren't you interested in like crime grandpa?
Crime grandpa. Okay, yeah, sure. Azure, how did you feel about this arc overall?
Oh, you know I love the grandpa stuff. You know I do. Even if he isn't a crime grandpa, you know I love the old people.
I know you love the old people because you're going to be a chaplain and you want to hang out with old people all the time.
Old people are great because they know so much. Like they've seen so. It's not that like they're wiser or anything. I don't think
they've just seen so much.
It's they have lived such. You know, you don't live that long without like experiencing a lot of things, and like old people just have more stories inside of them. It's just how it works.
All right. Yeah, so then part 2 is less grandpa.
Sadly,
less grandpa, yes. Part 2 is all okay. So at the end of part 1, you know, like Saku and Aki have been like, hey, we do crush each other, let's get together. But they're in high school, so they don't like, they're all weird about the sexy times. So the second part is all about how do we have the sexy times.
I feel like it's not even that. It's so Sakutaro's our POV protagonist, right? We're in his head. We never know what Aki's thinking or feeling. We just know what Sakutaro is guessing. So it's really about like, you know, Sakutaro being pressured by his friend Oki, like, hey, you gotta have the sex. You know, you're a man. That means you
men have the sex.
Yeah. Men want to have the sex.
What? No, okay, to be fair, Sakutaro wanted to have the sex before Oki came in here.
Sure. He was having, you know, he had the thoughts. He wanted to look, you know?
Yeah. He was being a creeper in a pool.
He was, and I was uncomfortable.
fair enough. But his nipples were X's, so I mean, it's fine.
He was talking about his boner, and I was like,
yeah, he did talk about his boner. He was like, oh, it weathered or whatever when Oki came along. But yes, so the meat of this plot is that Oki and Saku have talked to each other, and Oki's like, hey, I know of an island, like what's the word I'm looking for after? Secluded?
Sure.
I don't think that's the word I'm looking for, but it is now. Secluded island where they built a resort, but then it was abandoned. So there's just like, there's no electricity, but there's water and a bed. So they come up with this whole elaborate plot for all of them going to the island, but then Oki abandoning them with an excuse so that they can share a bed together and have the sex. And it does end with the sex, but it ends much better than it begins, which is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Where Aki reveals at the end that she's like,
we should clarify, Aki is not in on this plan. She's, she tries to like avoid going to this island
she's like, Oki's fake girlfriend didn't show up for our planned rendezvous. Guess we should go home. And they're like, no. She comes here all the time. She's bored. She's like, why we gotta go there again? Boring.
Yeah, so like Sakutaro's being cagey about it, and she picks up on it.
Yes, so Aki, is not a dummy and is like, I know that you two are scheming to get in my pants. I am not a dummy. And I actually really liked what she said, where she was like, it makes me really sad that you wouldn't be open with me, and it makes me jealous that you talk about your desires with somebody else who is not me. And I was like, dang, that was so real.
Yeah.
Aki is the cool one here, which I mean, of course, but
obviously.
The pure innocent girl is always the cool one. And then part 3 is all so they do have the sex because they talked it out, they talked feelings, which is great, excellent work. And they have the sex, but then Aki gets sick, and at first they are telling her that it is not leukemia. I forget what are they telling her it is?
Aplastic anemia.
Yes, they're telling her it's aplastic anemia, but it's definitely leukemia. And so they're like, oh no, she doesn't have a very high chance of recovering. Yeah, so it's very clear at some point that she's going to die. But Sakutaro had gotten to go on a class trip to Australia, and Aki, of course, was like, I wish I got to go to Australia. And is very sad that she did not. So Sakutaro is like, I'm going to take you to Australia. And they do a whole like jailbreak out of the hospital thing. That goes very badly. They do not make it to Australia. They definitely don't make it to Australia.
No.
And it ends with, in the beginning, that Aki's going to die. And it ends with Sakutaro being with his new girl, and it being revealed that like basically he's telling her the story of his first great love, Aki, and she's like, thank you, for telling me these things, which again is very much a story structure of A Walk to Remember as well. So I'm just like, I've been here before. I think the more important walkthrough are the 3 times that Aki cried, as laid out by the story and emphasized by Saku. So in the very beginning, it opens with Aki's favorite teacher dying, and she cries at the funeral. And this is where we learn that Oki is, I know it's Oki and Aki, it's very, anyway.
It's pretty bad. If it helps, his first name is Ryunosuke.
No, it doesn't. Because I'm not going to say that. Because that's not what they call him in the story. They call him Oki.
It's true.
Yeah, so this is where we learn that Oki's a jerk, because he's like telling distasteful jokes at the funeral of the teacher. And Sakutaro calls him out on it and is like, hey, don't be a jerk. She's like, dead. That's not nice.
Which he does because it upset Aki.
Of course.
Right.
He doesn't care. Inherently, he doesn't care. Yeah, then the second time is when is lying to her about like why they're on the island, and him not being open about their feelings. And then this point that we didn't touch on was Saku. How do I frame this story? So Aki starts crying when Saku is visiting her in the hospital, and she's like a wreck, and she's like breaking down because she doesn't want to keep fighting because it's very painful and all these things. So Saku again is pressuring her, being like, "Come on, you got to fight! Like you can survive," and all these things. And Aki is like, "Are you gonna be like my mom? Are you mad at me too? Am I disappointing you? Like all the and you think I'm being selfish?" And he's like, "No," but of course she's crying by that point. So it's just like, yeah. So I was most curious, Asher, since you definitely work more with people who are ill and want to be a chaplain, and I thought it was very interesting when we went to the hospital with your whole family how people treated your grandma when we were in the hospital, and I was like, Asher's the only respectful one here.
Yeah, and I mean, it's such a cultural thing, and it I think it's now I'm thinking about it. It's actually kind of weird that such very distant cultures have the same like optimistic
like you won't survive this unless you're happy to fight it through the pain.
Yeah. And like other cultures have different ways of doing it. Like there are, some cultures will actually like pretend they don't care to make the angel of death go away, So, there are other options is what I'm saying. Like it doesn't have to be like this. It's not the only mode to fight against. But yeah, no. I think it comes up in two of the times Aki cries is related to people keeping things from her and lying to her. And one of the important things about I don't I work with the elderly currently, and old age is not a disease, but one of the things that's important when we're talking with people who are not going to get better from whatever discomfort and pain and like the failing of parts of their body, it's important to like acknowledge their reality and like try to enter it and try to like be there with them rather than push them somewhere that they might not have the strength or they may not have the will to go. Like going with grace is also, a way people can approach both illness and death. Like, so yeah, I had a lot of feelings during that scene and during the whole part 3 where like it is unclear that they ever told her it was leukemia. She picked up that she was dying.
Oh,
she knows her
her?
body. Not on screen, I don't think. So like, they're doing it to try to keep her spirits up and protect her in that way, right? Like it's it comes out of love,
Yeah.
but it does not. There are effects that hurt her. So yeah, I have a lot of feelings about like not infantilizing people who don't have their full agency anymore, don't have their full capabilities anymore. And like it's complicated because Aki is, a minor and like those are her parents making these decisions. But like she was also a person. She was 16.
Yeah. I don't think anybody effectively enters her reality. And I think the other big misstep of people that we didn't mention is that like they're trying to get blood donation or blood marrow donations or whatever from her uncle, but she's like, he's not doing it out of like love, like it's kind of like a control, like you'll owe me type of thing. Right, somehow.
Right.
What did you think of them trying to go to Australia?
Oh, I mean, it was a poor decision. But the impulse was certainly better than it was better for Aki's like spirit than the crap they'd been trying to do before of like, no, it's going to be fine. You're fine and everything's going to be fine and just endure until then. Like what Sakutaro does is like, we are going to do something you want and you are going to have control over how you end your life. We're going to go to Australia so that you can go without regrets, you know? But yeah, like she went down so fast. It's like, okay, she wasn't going to make it to this blood marrow donation. She was like
I mean, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it's like the rash kind of decision made in young adult novels, and it's like, oh my god, why? But at the same time, I'm like, okay, that's fair. Like that's better than it could have been, you know?
Yeah, like narratively, I don't know that there was so much. There wasn't any like hate of that decision, right? I feel like there was no condemnation, like no strong condemnation of that.
Not that we were shown. Yeah, in my mind, I'm like, her parents.
Well, yeah, but we're not shown that.
Yeah, but yeah, the narrative doesn't give us that, which I think is good and important. It also doesn't condemn her parents, really, which I also think is important. Like, they were trying to help. It's a complicated situation. Nobody knows what to do in the face of death, especially death of a child. It's very, very difficult. And we all like, you build your lives around people, and the reality of losing them it's not something our brains like to grapple with at all. It's much
brains are bad at this.
Yeah, it's much more comfortable to deny and keep pushing, because that's, evolutionarily that's how we survived. But it makes relationships with people hard, because you're not communicating the same way. You're not speaking the same language or coming at an idea from the same point of reference.
I guess while you were talking, I was thinking about how, we were like, the biggest theme here is the constant like entanglement of love and death. Like anytime that like supreme happiness is mentioned, right? It's like, oh, but the death was like, the darkness was like consuming right behind it, right?
Right,
and all these
right.
things.
Like his love, like Sakutaro's love is tied up in this. Even before she gets sick, he's like, I'm so happy right now that if Aki were to disappear, I would be completely devastated. It's loss as well as death, like inextricable.
Yeah. Well, I guess I was kind of like, it almost feels like, yeah, like you're like, we can't really grapple with, our brains are not designed really to grapple with the inevitability of death of like specific people, I suppose, like as a concept where like, yes, things die, right? Like,
right.
But imagining a reality without a specific person is very difficult. But at the same time, it's like we almost can only achieve those moments of pure happiness by denying the death, right? Like that's what going to Australia is just them like running away from this death that they perceive.
Is that what you think? See, for me, I think it's like Sakutaro is implicitly he's acknowledging she knows her own body. She knows she's going to die. Let's do something that you want to do before it happens. So to me, it's less running away from the reality and more, still keeping it at arm's length, but holding its hand, maybe.
That makes sense.
That's how I want to see it anyway.
No, I like it. It's good. So, yeah, I just think that this manga actually gets a lot of things correct, including that. I guess it's very hard for me not to frame it in comparison to A Walk to Remember, like because I feel like I can only express how good they are to me in comparison to how they are lesser in A Walk to Remember, and I only recognize that as an older person who has experienced more things, read more things. So I guess I'll walk through them, but yeah. So I think it's very funny. When I was younger, and I was super into A Walk to Remember. When I was like 16, I was actually talking about it in a class. It was just a class where you had to read books. Like there was no requirement for what books it was. It was just like read 5 books in half a year.
So jealous.
Yeah, it was a great class. I loved it. It's the best. I encourage every high school should have this class. Truly. And like you didn't have to write papers or anything about it. All you had to do was talk about it with the teacher. Like you had to prove somehow that you had read it, but it was a verbal conversation normally. And I guess for this conversation, like for some reason we had a more like all class discussion once. At least I'm pretty sure it was this class. We were like talking about various books and like the best books that we had read and like blah blah blah. And so I said that I loved A Walk to Remember. And I said I loved it because it actually did not focus at all on sex.
Of course.
Oh, 16-year-old me. So good. Anyway, whereas now I'm like, no, that's silly. And Socrates in Love does such a better job at this. Like Socrates in Love does such a better job of acknowledging that teenagers have sexual desires and are bad at talking about them, and that really they should talk about them rather than resorting to trickery. Yeah. Instead of trying to like figure out how to get in each other's pants, where it's like maybe you should just ask. I don't know. Like it's really simple. So that's one. For sure. Like A Walk to Remember, other critical context for A Walk to Remember is that Nicholas Sparks is very religious, very Christian.
Very Christian. Yeah, it's important to say.
Yeah. So it's definitely written in a context like her name is Jamie, right? Jamie's dad is a minister. Like the Bible is important. Like her being Christian is important. This concept of purity, very important to the story. So it's very nice to see basically this very similar story taken out of the Christianity, like put in a different cultural context. I think also, yeah, that the acknowledgement that you will love many people in your lifetime, whether that's romantic, like yes, romantic, whether that's familial, whether that's friendship, and they will all be very important to you in different ways and hurt you when they die. That's okay to love somebody again is very important and very handled very well in Socrates in Love. Like that, the whole framing story is not like, yeah, you know, it's like Sakutaro telling it to us, but also revealed that he's telling it to somebody who he is also now romantically involved with and whom he loves dearly. Whereas A Walk to Remember is like Landon never loves again.
Oh, really? I forgot.
Yeah, no, he did. He marries Jamie, and then
oh, I forgot they did that. Oh my god.
Yeah, they get married, and then that's his one great love. He does not move on. He's like, gosh, yeah, we're just in love forever. He dies lonely.
Gross. No wonder I didn't like it that much.
Yeah. Yeah. Whereas young me was like, oh, super romantic, like, yeah. And now old me is like, oh my god, tragedy. Like,
yeah.
like just...
Context. So I read Socrates in Love for that girlfriend, that first girlfriend I had. I read A Walk to Remember for Ashley in college. God.
So it all comes back around.
Yeah. The things I do.
The things you do for foolish ladies, yes. Great. I think this is a overall more minor story beat within both A Walk to Remember and Socrates in Love, but perhaps like the most impactful to me is that, in Socrates in Love, again, we are shown that Oki is kind of smarmy, makes inappropriate jokes, like is trying to pressure Sakutaro into having sex with, like, tricking Aki into having sex with Sakutaro rather than encouraging an open discussion between the two of them about whether they're ready for that and all these things. So he is shown to be somewhat of a smarmy character. And there are definitely characters like this in A Walk to Remember too. Landon is actually supposed to be among them in the beginning. And the point is, that Jamie like shows him how wrong he is and makes him like this good boy. And because Jamie is dying, Jamie, so pure, shows Landon that he's wrong. And then because she's dying, the rest of the townspeople who have been mean to her and made her an outcast their whole life, they realize they've been wrong, and that they repent, in typical like Christian punishment, repentance ways. Whereas in Socrates in Love, like, Oki again is never like overtly condemned in any way, and in fact he is a great friend, even in adulthood, of Sakutaro. And I'm sure that he realizes that the things that he did were wrong and things like that. But I think it is much more realistic and like gratifying to see a story where, like the smarmy characters are just like, oh yeah, they're just humans who made mistakes. They were trying their best. Now they realize that they were wrong, not through any great like epiphany, not because Aki is dying, right? Like he's not like, oh my god, I have to be a better person, because now it's tragic and Aki was so pure and everything. It's just like, no, it's just like that doesn't matter at all into his like non-redemption arc, right? Like,
Right.
No, so I actually really appreciated that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is there anything else in particular you wanted to talk about, Asher?
No, I think it's one book.
Yeah, it's one book. One book to rule them all.
I mean, would we rank Socrates in Love over everything? I wouldn't.
No.
It's a good, solid manga. Like, it's exactly what you would expect of it, but it does it well, Yeah.
Like, again, there's something extra there to be like, okay, I see why this got elevated above similar things. There were also just some lines in it that I was like, that's pretty like poetic and nice. Yeah, like language wise.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of curious about the light novel, like, or not the light novel, whatever.
Just the
like
novel.
The novel, like, how did that read? Because there's a little excerpt of it in the back of the book. And I was like, oh, we get so much more detail about who these people actually are. It's not just
Yeah, I gotta say, trying to read it didn't keep my like attention though.
Oh, well, all right.
I guess I'm curious about reading the novel still, but I probably won't. I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, I probably won't either, but I am curious.
I actually really also liked the art, and maybe I think part of that is nostalgia. Like, it does have that like 90s.
It
like,
sure does.
It has, has that nice 90s aesthetic going on. I just feel like the things that I appreciated about the story, again, especially in comparison to A Walk to Remember, which like I traditionally rank as one of my top 3 novels of all time, along with A Farewell to Arms and The Hunger Games.
Remember when Nicholas Sparks compared himself to Hemingway?
Yeah, I wrote a whole essay on that. Or like I wrote like a whole thing on that. It all makes sense to me. So I just feel like the things that I needed from this story, like I got from the manga, and a novel that is much longer is not going to like give me, like something more. That's how I feel.
No, that's perfectly fair. I'm just sort of, I guess I'm curious about Oki, and like
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
I'm afraid it would ruin Oki for me.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Like, I feel like the less is more work might be in this manga's favor.
Perfectly fair, yeah.
I don't know. Maybe someday I'll find out. Talk to me when I'm 45.
God.
Yep. Anyway, thanks for listening to Shojo Don't Tell. Comments, questions, constructive criticism, concerns. Need to tell us how much you cried at this story? Email shoujoandtell@gmail.com or leave a comment on the episode's YouTube page. We're at Shojo and Tell on Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram. You cannot find Asher on the internet. I'm hoarding him. He is mine.
People could.
Fine. Do you want them to find you on the internet?
No, not really.
Damn. Yeah, you're mine. Okay. Are you excited every time you see a new episode from us? If so, please consider leaving a rating on Apple Podcasts. This will help the podcast reach more hearts, or at least ears. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next time for either Tokyo Mew Mew or Pet Shop of Horrors. At least I think. I have not planned this out well, so maybe it'll be the second half of Our Horror Ride or Waiting for Spring, because oh my god, I've been waiting to do that Waiting for Spring podcast for a year at this point. Thanks, pandemic, and surprise extra volume that I didn't know about. Those are all on the docket though, so no matter what order it happens in, get hype. Bye.
Bye.
And remember, never stop digivolving.
God.